just can't find this file. I have no idea where it is. How am I going to make today's video if I don't have that file? Oh, you've caught me working. Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming by for some more great stories. Today, on Cozy Horror, with me, Dr. Plague. You've caught me in the middle of my video making process. You caught me. It is a lot of splicing, but I try to do my best so that you get my best. But enough about that. Let's get some videos rolling, shall we? This first story is about the homeless and how they're getting by the best way they can, despite the cold weather or maybe a lack of food. It also talks about one of my favorite pastimes, as you might guess, which is storytelling around a fire. So, let's hear a story about the sounds from the woods. I've been living rough for about a year now. It's not as bad as you'd think. Not really. When COVID hit, I lost my job. The food industry got hit pretty hard, and the catering business I worked for had suddenly closed up shop. When I couldn't pay my rent, my landlord put me on the street. I suppose I could have gone and gotten an assistance check, but I met some guys at a soup kitchen I was crashing at, and they invited me to come live rough with them. For the last 9 months, I've been traveling from town to town with a great group of guys who've been homeless for years. I know this makes me sound like a tourist, but it's really not as bad as you'd think. I've been enjoying a freer lifestyle than I ever had before. I travel around with 4 guys, and they keep an eye on me, and I keep an eye on them. They call me Kid, and I'm lucky to have fallen in with them, all things told. Travis is a vet from Iraq who couldn't seem to live in an apartment after spending 6 months in an Iraqi prison. He's a rough guy, but very protective of his squad, which I guess is us now. Conley is more like a classic tramp. He's old enough to be my granddad and seems to get by mostly on panhandling. He can be real charming, and he's amiable enough, whether he's drunk or sober. He's more than happy to share what he makes with the rest of us, too. Then, of course, there's John. Of the 3, I think John is the one I like the best. He reminds me of my dad somehow. He's tall and thin with bushy eyebrows and a thick salt and pepper beard. He works as a handyman sometimes to make money, and he seems more than content to keep a protective eye on all of us. Despite Conley being 15 years older than him, you can tell that he thinks of all of us as his kids. He was very protective of us, and I spent many nights around a campfire with the 3 of them. John was always at the head of the fire, like a father at his table, and we often told stories as we hunkered around our camp. On the night in question, we were telling scary stories. We had camped in the woods off the interstate, far enough in that our fire couldn't be seen from the road, and we were eating food we had all bought and telling tales. Conley was talking about a ghost story he had heard in Denver, and Travis told us about a ghost soldier spotted around the barracks he was assigned to in Iraq. I told one of my many creepypastas I'd read during my other life, and finally we looked at John. John was eating quietly through it all, and now seemed intent on continuing his dinner. "Your turn, Dad," I said, using the teasing nickname I had fixed on him. "I don't really like to tell stories," he said, and his voice had a hollow tone to it as he busied himself with his can of stew. "Come on, John," said Conley, already sounding like his dinner was affecting him. "We all told a story. Now it's your turn." I was sitting next to John at his right hand, and I saw him darken a little as Conley prodded at him. "Easy, Conley. If John doesn't want to tell a story, then he doesn't have to." "Fine. You guys want a story? I got a story for you." John sounded a little mad, and Conley raised his hands in a placating way as he told him it was fine. "It's a great story. I think you'll love it. Gather up, kids. It's a real doozy." He reached over and took the bottle of rot gut from Conley, taking a deep swig before he started. He sounded flustered, out of sorts, and I kind of didn't want him to tell it now. Clearly something was going on here that was outside the norm, and I was afraid of what might happen after his story was told. Want it or not, though, John began. "It was midnight, just like tonight. The August wind was creeping in from the east, cold and hungry, as the 2 boys sat around their campfire, munching their dinner of beans. They didn't have the luxury of a home or a hearth, only having the other in this world. Their parents had cast them out, not having enough money to feed them any longer, and the 2 boys had been riding the rails, seeking their fortunes as they tried to make it day by day. The two boys had managed to beg enough for a can of beans, and as they sat around the fire, they listened to the bubbling inside as their stomachs growled and their mouths watered. They hadn't eaten in 3 days, you see, and the smell of them beans was enough to make them ravenous. They sat closer to the fire, basking in the smell of the cooking beans, and that's when they heard the cry. The two huddled close to the fire, shuddering as the howl glided up between the trees. Their campfire wavered under the torrent of wind, and they hunkered close as they tried to keep alive. They blocked it with their bodies, feeling the icy bite of the wind as they tried to cook their dinner. The howl growled across their shivering skin, and the two boys wondered if that would be their last meal. The beans began to boil over the lip of the can, and the older boy's threadbare glove to allow him to slide it from the flames. He poured the beans into a tin cup for his brother, gritting his teeth as the heat became too hot even for his gloved hand. As he poured, he could feel something stalking behind them. It had smelled their food and came to look. If they were lucky, it was just a little cat or a mangy dog that would leave if they shouted. If they weren't, then the older boy would stand against it while the brother ran. Either way, the two would eat a few mouthfuls of beans before they died. He wrapped his scarf around the can gingerly, holding it by the tatty garment as he tipped the scalding beans into his mouth. They burned his tongue and blistered his throat, but his hunger was too great to wait. His brother moaned in pain as he did the same, the two of them feeding their bodies as the scalding food nourished them. And all the while the beast howled and stalked behind them. Neither boy looked into the dark woods. They knew that something stalked them, that something wanted them desperately. But they thought that if they ignored it, it might just pass them by. As it moved around them, the oldest could see that it was like a dog. It capered about on all fours, its teeth bone white as it grinned at them. It stalked their little fire, circling the pair 3 times before stopping. It stood between the two, its arrow-shaped head pushed in close. The two boys ate, trying to ignore it, not wanting to see it, and hoping it would just go away. When it spoke, the younger of the two began to cry in terror.
You come into my woods, bring your destructive fire, and then you don't even offer me a proper gift. What rude children you are. I should punish you for such insolence.
The boys begged the creature, saying they had nothing to give, but the creature only scoffed.
You should have thought of that before entering my woods.
The two boys begged him for mercy, to take pity on 2 starving children.
Mercy is not a trait I ever saw a need to learn. Those who enter my realm bring me gifts. You will present me with a gift, or you will suffer my wrath.
He spoke with a sense of refinement that was at odds with his monstrous nature. The boys had still not summoned up the courage to look at him, and now they shuddered against each other as they thought of what to do. The oldest looked at his still warm can of beans in his hand and saw that he had 2, possibly 3 bites of beans left. He held them out to the creature, still not looking at him, and hoped it would be enough. The creature approached, sniffing at the can, and a weight slid into the warm vessel. It slurped as its long tongue lapped at the beans, smacking as it tasted the juice and liking what it found.
Lovely.
The creature purred, turning its head towards the younger, who had begun to shake.
And you? Share with me what is in your cup, little one, and you might be allowed to live through the night.
The youngest had his hand over the mouth of his cup, unwilling to move it. His brother told him to give the creature a taste. Then they could leave this place and never come back. The youngest boy shook his head again. The creature put his face very close to the boy and demanded that he remove his hand in a low growl. The boy's shaking hand slid from the cup opening, and the brother felt his stomach drop. The younger boy had wolfed his beans, eating them all, and had nothing to show but a cup of juice residue. The older boy could see his tears cutting lines down his dirty face, leaving trails of pink against his skin. He started apologizing, hastily and low, to the older boy, saying he just couldn't help himself. As the creature asked for his due, the younger could only hold out his shaking, empty cup for the beast to inspect. The tongue slid into the metal, making a soupy, gloopy noise as the creature searched for food. And as it slid out, the two heard the creature tutting in disappointment.
What a shame.
Suddenly, the warmth of the brother's forehead was gone, and the forest was filled with the sounds of his younger brother screaming. The older brother curled into a ball, shuddering and weeping as he heard his brother torn to pieces. He closed his eyes and begged God to make it over, but it was some time before the forest was quiet again. He lay there listening to the wind howl, his campfire guttering out as he shivered in the dark, alone. The three of us sat speechless, looking at John as the campfire crackled before him. Out in the woods, an animal loosed a long, mournful howl, and Conley suddenly decided to sleep under the nearby overpass. "It's chilly, but at least I won't get ate up by no beast." Travis agreed, and the two grabbed their stuff and moved on. "Better go join them," John said, poking at the fire as he looked into the flames. "Sounds like an old friend is looking for his due." I heard something in his words I didn't like, something akin to a suicidal friend telling you it's fine to leave them alone, but I got up and followed the others anyway. The last time I saw John, he was still staring into the flames. We looked for him the next day, but he was nowhere to be found. We found the old campsite. We found his pack, but of John, there was no sign. By midday, we just assumed he had left, and we moved on. I'm still not entirely sure what happened to him, but if you meet John on the road somewhere, tell him his troop misses him. And if you meet the creature from his story, I hope you saved it some beans. Otherwise, you might discover what really happened to John on that windy December night by the interstate. I don't know how tech-savvy some of you guys are, but the rate that some of these files deteriorate is terrible. I end up having to supplement some stuff into each one, and one of these days, I swear, I'm going to organize everything here. But you guys don't care about that. Let's get back to the stories. Going from the homeless in the woods to scouts out in the woods, let's hear a little nightmare fuel-inducing story about the sleepwalkers of Camp Moonsong. All I wanted when I was a kid was to go to summer camp. Every summer, I would beg my parents to send me, but they always said the same thing. It's too expensive, or it's too far away, or we can't afford to drive out there when you get homesick. I know, summer camps have fallen out of popularity these days, but they were just about the coolest thing to a kid in the early 90s. Every show had a summer camp episode. There were movies with summer camps. There were even music videos on MTV about summer camps, for God's sake. I felt like I was missing out on a big part of my childhood experience by not being allowed to go, but every year I was forced to sit at home and wish. So when Mom told me that she had found a summer camp for me when I was 11, I was ecstatic. Camp Moonsong was an all-girls camp about an hour from our house, and the fee for 60 days' stay was surprisingly low. Low enough to make Mom suspicious that it was some sort of front for a sweatshop or something, and she read over the paperwork very carefully with my dad. I remember just hovering outside the kitchen as they went over it, Dad not showing her level of dedication as he held paperwork in one hand and smoked with the other. They talk about not being responsible for injuries or accidents a lot in this stuff, I remember Mom saying, and then sighing when Dad scoffed. They're just being careful, Wendy. Sounds perfect, honestly. She's been begging to go to one for years. If we don't send her before 13, I think she'll miss her chance. You know, 12's usually the cutoff on these kinds of things. They discussed it for a while, and when they finally came and said I could go, I was overjoyed. I had my bags packed before the last week of school was even out, and on the second day of summer vacation, my mom and dad drove me to the camp for drop-off. It was beautiful, one of those camps like you see on TV. It was in the middle of the woods with a bunch of little cabins next to a lake, and I could see a boathouse, hiking trails, archery courses, and all kinds of things that I was chomping at the bit to go try. We met the head counselor at the main cabin, a smiling blonde lady named Gladys. And after some hugs and some last-minute checks of my stuff, my parents headed out, and I was shown to the Sparrow cabin, where I would be staying for the next 60 days. That is where I met Lauren, Sandy, Heather, and Claire, the girls who would be my cabin mates. Sandy and Heather were 12, and this was their first time at Moonsong, but not at sleepaway camp. Lauren was 10, and she had never been to camp either, so this was a first for both of us. Claire, however, had been coming here for about 3 years, and she was the only one of us who didn't look excited. She was trying to put on a brave face, clearly not wanting to spook us, but her mood was kind of off. Claire was also our cabin captain, so when the loudspeaker came on, welcoming us and telling us to meet at the pavilion for orientation, she led the way. The pavilion turned out to be a small amphitheater, a stone stage with rows of concrete seats leading up and out of it. We took a seat at the section near the stage, all of us chatting animatedly, except for Claire, as the other cabins assembled. Each cabin had 5 girls. There were 6 cabins in all: sparrow, magpie, grouse, dove, hawk, and crow. They had all spread out a little, giving each cabin room to gather, and as we all sat chattering, the camp counselors arrived to start the orientation. "Welcome, welcome, welcome, campers," said Gladys, her voice echoing off the stone benches, "and welcome to another exciting year at Camp Moonsong." There were a few other adults on the stage, and she introduced them as the activity directors. There was a counselor for swimming, canoeing, archery, hiking, nature studies, physical challenges, and arts and crafts. Gladys told us how our daily schedules would be posted on the bulletin board outside of our cabins at first light, and that each day would end with a marshmallow roast at the fire pit. "And don't forget, the fire pit is where we choose that night's sleepwalker," she said, something that brought nothing but polite claps from some of the campers. I saw more than a few of them that looked like Claire when she said it, and I realized there might be something a little strange at work here. Our first activity was archery, so Claire took us back to the cabin to get ready. "So, what's with the sleepwalker thing?" I asked, Heather chiming in as well as Claire went to go get a shirt that was a little more comfy. "It's nothing," she said, stripping out of her polo and slipping on a t-shirt. "It's just something that Camp Moonsong does. It doesn't mean anything. It's just tradition." "What do you mean?" I asked, the 4 of us falling in behind her as we headed for the range. She made a frustrated noise, rounding on us angrily. Just don't worry about it. If you're lucky, it won't be a problem anyway. There's 30 of us. The chances are good that a few of you might never have to see it, she said, the last more to herself than anything. See what? I asked, but she ignored me as we came to the archery course. We had archery, arts and crafts, and a trip to the lake that day, and by the time the sun set and the bonfire sprang to life, I found I'd quite forgotten about the sleepwalker. We spent a while roasting and eating marshmallows, singing songs, telling spooky stories, and then I saw Gladys step close to the fire with a box that rattled a little. Some of the girls looked at it ominously, Claire among them, but Gladys was all smiles. Okay, campers, it's time to pick tonight's sleepwalker. You returning campers know how it works. If you reach into the box and draw out the black ball, you're tonight's sleepwalker. I snorted, not quite sure why this had some of them so worried. What, were they gonna come and scare us in our cabin if one of us drew the black ball? Would we have to scare people? What was this, I wondered, because it all seemed kind of ridiculous. The box had barely gone through 5 people when a girl of about 8 got the black ball. It was clearly her first time here because she seemed pleased but mystified as she handed Gladys back the ball. Gladys asked what her name was and then announced that Brenda was the summer's first sleepwalker. After that, we all went back to our cabins, even Brenda, and I remember sitting up a little with the other girls and whispering about how silly it all was. Were they trying to scare us or something? Ooh, sleepwalkers, we all said as we laughed, but when Claire told us to go to sleep, she said something that took the starch out of our sheets. Wait till tomorrow morning, then we'll see if you still think it's funny. She was right. The bugle woke us up the next morning, and we all shuffled to breakfast in the mess hall. Amidst the chomps of cereal, toast, eggs, and bacon, I heard someone sniffling loudly. It wasn't normal sniffling, like the kind you get from someone being homesick. This was different, and I didn't have words for it yet. I do now that I've grown up a little. It's the hopeless kind of sniffling from someone who's lost something they can't get back, like a mother or a wife crying for a husband or a child. I glanced over at the crow table and saw that it was Brenda. She looked terrible, like she hadn't slept at all, and the circles under her eyes looked more like bruises. She wasn't eating, despite how the girls in her cabin tried to coax her, and her eyes seemed to weep constantly. The crow table was next to ours, and she seemed to be telling them in between sobs that she wanted to go home. They were trying to talk her out of it, saying that the chances were low that she would draw it again, and after a few days, she would forget all that she had seen. I didn't exactly know what to make of them, but I would learn. For the next week and a half, I watched as different girls drew the black ball. The ones who had been here before took it better than the new ones, and the new ones were always in tears the next day. Because of how the schedules were set up, we really didn't have a lot of interaction with the other cabins. We lived with the girls in our cabin, but outside of meals and the fire pit, we didn't see the others during the day. Most of them stuck pretty close to their groups during the periods in between activities, and none of them wanted to talk about what was going on if you asked them. Then, about a week and a half after Brenda drew the ball, Heather drew out the jet black sphere and was that night's sleepwalker. I remember the look on her face when she drew it out, the look of uncertainty and fear, and Gladys named her the sleepwalker of the night. She went back to the sparrow cabin, seeming unsure of what to expect, and as we got ready for bed, we all watched her a little apprehensively. "So," Heather asked, "what happens now? Do I start walking or something? Do they come and get me in the night?" "Maybe they're going to make you disappear," Lauren said, and we all laughed nervously. "Just go to sleep," Claire said, and it shut us all up as we looked at her. "It won't happen till then." She slid under her blankets and slid a pillow over her head. So we all settled in, turning the lamp off and nestling down for sleep. Heather was soon snoring, as was Lauren, and I yawned as I drifted off as well. I guessed if something was going to happen, then It would happen. Before I knew it, I was dreaming about swimming and friendship bracelets and all the other things I was going to do tomorrow. I woke up in the middle of the night, filled with a need to pee worse than anything I'd ever felt. I was coming back from the latrines, almost back in bed, when I glanced at Heather and saw something that stopped me in my tracks. Heather's mouth was open in a silent oh of a scream. Her hands were bunched up in the covers, and she was writhing slowly on the sheets of her small bed. Her eyes were closed, shut tight like they might be locked that way, and she sucked in breath like she might be screaming in whatever dream she was having. I woke the others, showing them what was happening, and when Sandy reached out to shake her, Claire grabbed her by the wrist. It won't do any good, and it could make it worse. You just have to let her get over it on her own. But we can't just leave her like this. She's in pain, Sandy said. She could be in more pain if you wake her up. She'll come out of this at dawn, so just let her be. We went back to bed, none of us but Claire sleeping, and when the sun came up, Heather came awake, shaking like someone who's been startled badly. She looked around like something might be after her, like this might all be a dream too, and when we came to comfort her, she began to sob. Her eyes had the same dark circles that I'd seen on the other girls, and she walked to chow when the bugle sounded like a zombie. She didn't eat breakfast, and when I asked her what she dreamed about, Claire shot me a nasty look. We don't talk about it. The worst thing you can do is to make her relive it. But if we know what happens when you're the sleepwalker, if you're lucky, Claire said, talking over me as my voice rose, you'll never have to find out. No, Heather said suddenly. No, I want to talk about it. Claire got a pained look. You don't have to. I know what it's like. It's not something you should have to relive. Wait, I said, putting something together that I should have a while ago. You knew this was going to happen, and you didn't warn us. Why didn't you say something? Because it wouldn't have done any good, Claire said. Knowing it's coming doesn't make it any easier. It's terrible, no matter if it's the first time or the fifth. I got chosen twice last year. The knowing doesn't matter. It's terrible, every time. Do you want to know or not? Heather said, turning to us angrily. Because I'm only going to tell it once, and then I never want to talk about it again. We said we did, and she got a faraway look as she began. I was in the woods. It was night, and everything was dark. Then I felt something watching me, something like a tiger or a bear or something. It was big, whatever it was, because when it roared, it shook all the trees around me. I started running through the woods as fast as I could. You say I was in bed, but my legs ache and my arms feel the pine needles that slashed at them. I ran and ran and ran, but it never seemed to catch me. It was always just out of sight, just out of reach. And the farther I ran, the more afraid I got. After a while, I felt like I was going crazy. I was so scared, so absolutely terrified, and it just never ended. Then, just as the sun came up, I heard it roar, and I heard the trees rustle as it jumped, and I fell down as something heavy hit me. Then I woke up, and you guys were standing there looking at me. She started crying then, and Claire gave her a hug as she assured her that it was over. She was safe now. Needless to say, Heather decided to stay in when we saw it was our turn to hike today. She'd spent a whole night in the woods and saw no reason to spend another hour looking at nature. That's how it went that summer. Every night we drew the balls from the box, and every night it was some girl's turn to spend it in a state of terror. Sandy got her turn, Laura too. Even Claire had to suffer it one night. But never me. Some of the girls went twice, but I seemed to be immune to the black ball. It never chose me. If it hadn't been for the team challenge, I would never have experienced it. Team challenge was Gladys's idea, and she was clearly proud of it. It was the last week of camp, and I'd almost thought I would get away without having to be the sleepwalker. We were gathered for the morning meeting after breakfast, and all of us assembled in the amphitheater. Gladys stood up there, smiling like she had a big surprise for us. And I suppose she was right. "Good morning, 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 campers. This week I have something special planned. Today we start the team challenges. 2 cabins will face each other in 3 events: archery, canoe races, and obstacle course. The winner will be immune to sleepwalking for that night. The losing cabin, however, will all have to be the sleepwalkers that night." No one cheered, but we all knew the stakes. The way it shook out was for 3 days the cabins would compete. On the 4th day, one of them would get the bye, and the other 2 would face off. On the 5th day, the last 2 would go head-to-head for the crown of best cabin. Saturday would be color war, and then pickup. Claire took us aside and told us we had to win this. Everyone in the cabin's been the sleepwalker at least once. "Well, almost all of us," she said, looking at me jealously. I didn't feel good about it. Quite the contrary, I felt terrible. Heather had been the sleepwalker twice, Sandy too, and I hadn't been picked once. I didn't want to either. I'd watched them go through it, and it looked miserable. As it happens, though, I had one of the best times on the obstacle course, and I was one of the better campers on the archery range. I felt we had a good chance of winning this thing, and the girls agreed as we started making a game plan. The Sparrows beat the Crows on Tuesday, and when we got the bye on Thursday, we were hopeful that we could win this thing, and the incentive was on full display. The losing team showed up to breakfast with bags under their eyes, shaking noticeably as they refused to eat. Whatever was going on, it was even worse in a group, and we were prepared to win against the Hawks and take the whole contest. We had them at archery, but they smoked us at the canoe race. We were certain that we could whip them at the obstacle course, but that's when disaster struck. As Claire came across the final leg of the course, having gone last so I could go first and give us a strong start, she slipped and fell off the beam, the race going to our opponents. The Hawks won, and we would be the sleepwalkers that night. We fought it, trying to stay up as late as we could, trying to stay up all night, but we were just so tired. By 11, we were all dozing. By midnight, we lost the fight. I remember blinking owlishly as I watched Claire drifting off fitfully. When I opened my eyes, I was in the forest. We were all in the forest, looking around as we awoke into some kind of strange shared dream. I was just trying to orient myself when I heard the roar that Heather had described, and it galvanized me in a way that nothing ever had. It was like a bear's roar mixed with something feline and something much deeper. I imagined it was a Tyrannosaurus Rex, the scream of some extinct creature come back to life, and I started running. They were with me in the beginning, all of us neck and neck as we fled into the woods. It was always behind us, stomping through the trees like it was as tall as a redwood. It crashed, it rumbled, and as we ran for our lives, it menaced us from the darkness. Heather was the first to fall. I looked back, meaning to help her, but the darkness swirled up and took her. Her tear-streaked, terrified face was there one moment, and then suddenly she was swallowed up by the gloom. Laura fell next, stumbling as she looked back at Heather, and I didn't look back to see what gobbled her up. I kept running, kept showing my heels, and when Sandy fell too, I didn't even notice right away. I was in a state of panic, something I would later call a heightened terror response when I went to college to study psychology. It was similar to the response prey animals have when they're fleeing for their lives, a kind of thing that gets them eaten by pack hunters when another one pops up on the side while they're focused on the threat behind them. I ran and ran and ran, my legs pumping and my heart racing. I didn't know when Claire fell, or even if she did, but I felt the branches that reached out to slow me down and the rocks that battered my bare feet. I felt every mile that I ran, and I felt every horrifying stumble as I nearly lost my balance. I kept running for my life, and when the sun came up at long last, I didn't stop. I heard it spring, heard it come up from behind me like a tidal wave, but if it hit me, I didn't know about it. I came awake like I meant to fight off an attacker, and the other girls were around me, looking as bad, if not worse. We lost the color war. All of us were too tired to focus. Mom commented on the bruises under my eyes when she came to pick me up, but I just hugged her and said how glad I was to see her. I never spoke about that summer, not until I wrote my senior thesis on the difference between irrational and rational fear in adolescence. I didn't think I would ever visit those memories again, not till today. I've been working as a psychiatrist since I graduated, helping kids get over their trauma and trying to find them some relief. Most of it's normal stuff, divorcing parents or concerned about their school friends. We talk about monsters in closets or stories that won't go away when they close their eyes. Typical little kid stuff, but sometimes I help them tell parents about someone who's doing something they shouldn't, so that person can go somewhere where they can't hurt them again. Those are the good days, the days I feel like I've made a difference. When the girl started telling me about the dreams, the ones she had after her mother said they had enrolled her in camp again, I felt myself beginning to hyperventilate. She described dreams of something big chasing her through the woods at night, about dreams that only come when she was at camp, and only when she was the sleepwalker. I didn't even feel it at first when the pen snapped in my hand, and when the girl said, her voice panicked, that I was bleeding, I looked down to see that my hand had the jagged end of a pen buried in it. I told her mother that she might want to find another summer camp this year, not voicing what I actually believed, so I didn't sound crazy. The mother seemed concerned. "But Jenny loves Camp Moonsong. She's gone every year since she was 9. I strongly recommended that she find her daughter another camp, and the two left mollified with a prescription refill. I had never imagined the place was still open, never in my wildest dreams. I sat in my office, trying to control the shakes as my hand throbbed like an infected tooth. I'm afraid to go to sleep tonight, something I haven't been afraid of since that first week of camp. I'm afraid I might wake up in the woods again, fleeing the thing that chases the sleepwalkers. One of these days, I've really got to go back and make some new thumbnails. Some of these look really terrible. But let's proceed on with our next story about something that most parents are very familiar with. Something that reflects one of my great fears as well. Something that makes it into a lot of my stories, it seems. Let's talk about a sad little tale involving the silent treatment. It was a fight like any of the others we had recently had. Little did I know it would be the last fight we ever had, though. Our fight was about grades. They all seemed to be about grades at that time. He'd been heading out the door, dressed to go hang out in the woods with his little hoodlums he called friends. I suspected they were drinking, and I was absolutely sure they were out there smoking. I was tired of cleaning up after him and watching him slip slowly into delinquency. He told me he'd be back, and I told him to stop and come have a seat instead. He glowered at me from the door, knowing what I wanted to talk about, and not liking it. He slammed the door and came to sit on the couch, knowing he was about to sit down for another ass chewing. His grades had come in, and they were the worst they had ever been. When I told him this, he said it wasn't his fault. I sighed. It was never his fault. Nothing was ever his fault. There was always someone else to blame, someone else to point the finger at, and it was never up to him to take responsibility. This was old ground. We retread it for the 1,000th time, it seemed. He would have to repeat the 11th grade at this rate. He said he didn't care. He would have to quit his job if he couldn't keep his grades up. He didn't care about that either. I would snatch everything but his air. His car, his games, his computer, everything that mattered to him, and he would be stuck with nothing but studying. And that was the stroke that finally got through to him. Mom never had to stoop to this. Mom always knew there was a better way than to just punish me all the time. He said exactly what he knew I needed to hear to lose my temper. Well, she isn't here, is she, Marcus? She's dead. Or have you forgotten? I could see by his pained expression that I'd touched a nerve. How could either of us forget that little fact? It just hadn't felt like home here without her. We had done a lot of fighting, staying cooped up in our rooms, and not a lot of talking about the hurt we both felt at her passing. She had always kept us from escalating to this level of arguments that would quickly come to the cusp of violence, I was starting to believe. My wife had been the pillar that held our relationship up. My wife had been dead for almost a year now, and it had been the worst year of my life. She died very suddenly, painlessly, the EMTs told me. She had been turning into the grocery store to get our weekly shopping list done when a bus had struck her car. Her car had rolled 4 times before coming to rest against a tree, and the impact had killed her even as it smashed in the doors of the car. I can remember when I'd gotten the phone call, sitting at my desk and preparing to file some reports. I had given bad news to spouses like this 1,000 times when I was on the force, but it's different when that kind of horror visits you personally. We buried her in the family plot, and the 2 of us had gone home to try and make the most of the house we had left. We had fought bitterly nearly every day since. I saw Marcus tear up and turn away before he could see my eyes filling up as well. I hate you. Sometimes I wish I'd been in that car with her. That took me back a moment, and I answered out of anger before I could stop myself. Sometimes, son, I wish you had too. We were silent for a solid minute before he got up and walked slowly towards the hallway. Then don't bother worrying about me anymore. Maybe I'll go talk to Mom, see if she wants to listen. Then he stomped down the hallway and slammed his door behind himself, leaving me alone to feel like a shitty parent and the worst person alive. I spent the next few hours bustling about to distract myself. I made dinner, folded some laundry, and generally picked up while dinner boiled and simmered. When it finally finished, I assembled it on a plate and took it to the door of his room, intending it to be a peace offering. Marcus. I called his name softly, knocking on the door and leaning in to listen. The other side of the door was quiet, not a sound to be heard, but I thought I could hear the creak of the mattress as its occupant rolled over. I sighed. He was ignoring me. That made me angry. I was trying to extend an olive branch, and here he was ignoring me. Well, dinner's in the fridge when you decide to stop being mad, I said. His dinner went into the fridge, and I decided to flip on my Xbox and try to block out his childish behavior. I was still playing later when I heard the door creak open and the light footsteps he always used when he was trying to sneak out of his room. I ignored him as he scuttled up the hallway, clearly checking to see if I was in the living room. It had gotten dark a few hours ago. A check of the time showed me it was 10 o'clock, and I was a little angry that he was still awake. As he crossed behind the couch, I told him to get his food and go to bed. You don't need to stay up all night. He didn't say anything. He just scuttled off to his room and closed the door. I went back to playing my game, and about an hour later I took myself off to bed. I locked my door, just in case, but I wasn't expecting any trouble. My son was a hothead, just like his old man, but he wasn't usually violent. He was a good kid, but it was hard to see the good under all that yelling. I wish now that I had looked harder. Maybe I could have prevented what came next. The next day was Saturday, and I spent the day cleaning and catching up on things. I didn't see my son all day. He didn't come out for meals or just to ask me if he could have any of the myriad of things returned for the weekend. This wasn't out of the ordinary for him. Last summer, he would just stay up all night, and we'd never see him until morning, or the few times he got a wild hair to wake up early. After last night, I was a little glad he didn't come out. Truth be told, I didn't really want to see him, and his silence was kind of nice. When noon rolled around and I hadn't heard the flush of a toilet or the footsteps across the floor, I became a little concerned. I went to his door and knocked, calling his name, expecting to hear some response. There was nothing, not a sound from inside, and I started to feel angry again. I remembered how he had iced me out the night before, and left without saying anything. If he wanted to play the silent treatment game, so could I. I didn't think about it again until I was getting ready for bed, his door still not having rattled all day. I showered, took my sleep aid, and went to bed. Getting comfy down under the covers, I started to think that maybe I should be more concerned. Was he sick? Hurt? Perhaps he was waiting for me to apologize so he could get back on even footing. I got half out of bed before my anger flared up again. He just wanted me to be the first one to crack. I rolled back in bed, putting the pillow over my head as I tried to fall asleep. I wasn't going to play these games with him. I was not going to be the first one to crack. I awoke in the middle of the night to a loud crashing noise in the kitchen. I was next to the bed in a heartbeat, police training taking over, finding the box that held my handgun. I crept towards the bedroom door, quiet as a mouse, as the destruction continued to cascade around the kitchen. I wrapped my hand around the doorknob, just as a sound like a stove tipping over crunched across the house. I winced, wondering who the hell was making such a ruckus in my kitchen. It had to be some meth head or something. No burglar would be this incompetent. I opened the door quietly and tiptoed through the living room, boxer shorts being my only covering. The noise had stopped after the loud crash, but I was taking no chances. The last thing I wanted to do was get jumped on as I came around the corner, and I kept my gun up and at the ready. When I peeked around the edge of the bar, I could see a huge mess spreading across the usually pristine kitchen. The refrigerator doors were open, food and juice spilling everywhere, and the stove was indeed flipped onto its face as it lay on the floor. Bakelite glass was scattered across the ground and added to the overall catastrophe that had stretched across the kitchen. Of my intruder, however, there was no sign. I searched across the house and found no one. The door was locked, front and back, and none of the windows were open. It was pretty clear that no one had broken in to trash my kitchen, and I could feel my anger flare up again as I looked at the disaster. Only one person could have been responsible for this, and he was currently pretending I didn't exist. This time I hammered on the door. "What the hell? You ruined my kitchen, wasted my food, and just scuttle back off to your hole? Get your ass out here and help me clean this shit up." No sound came from inside. I was furious. Did he think he could just wreck the house and then ignore me? Who the hell did he think he was? He was on thin ice, and if this was how he wanted to act, I would be suggesting to his grandmother tomorrow that maybe he ought to go live with her for a while. He was 17 after all, and if he wanted to act like an idiot, I was tempted to call the police. Let him spend a night in jail, if that's how he wanted to act. I threw the door open then, and there he was, lying with his back to me, under his heavy comforter. "Get your ass up. You can help me clean up this mess, and then we can have a long talk about why you think it's okay to destroy my kitchen." He lay still, ignoring me, giving me the literal cold shoulder. I took a step into his room, fists balled up as I prepared to turn him over roughly and shout at him until he decided to listen. I stopped myself, though, after that first step. Maybe this was what he wanted. If I had considered that the police might solve my problem for me, then surely he had as well. He was hoping I would get rough with him so he could get me in trouble. Well, I was not about to play right into his hands. I grabbed the chair from beside his door and wedged it up under the doorknob as I closed it behind myself. Good luck wrecking the place now, asshole. I didn't sleep that night. I cleaned the kitchen before dragging myself back to bed just as the sun came up. I was filthy, sweaty, and smelled strongly of pine sol. The kitchen had taken a lot of work, and I fell into a filthy, thin sleep as I lay in my bed. My dreams were full of wrecked kitchens, thankless children, and lots of screaming. I slept poorly despite my tiredness and woke up grumpy and sore. I saw that the chair was still there as I walked to the bathroom and sniffed. He probably could have opened that door, but it would have taken a lot of shoving. Likely his activities from the night before had taken a lot out of him, and now he was too tired to get up. Oh well, I thought. He'll get hungry sometime, and then he'll have to come out and talk to me. I showered, ate a late breakfast, and busied myself with the rest of the day. I kept listening for him, expecting him to curse as he discovered the chair I'd pushed under his door, or flush a toilet, but he never made a peep. His room was as quiet as a tomb, and he never so much as turned on the TV or walked to the bathroom. That should have raised a red flag with me, but I was still so mad from the night before. If he wanted to starve in there, let him do it, I suppose. I left him alone, and when it was time for bed, I crawled in gladly and was snoozing about the time my head hit the pillow. I heard the chair scrape harshly across the floor about 11, and I climbed out of bed to go catch him leaving his room as the sounds became harsher still. I got about halfway across the bedroom when something hit my door hard enough to rattle it in its frame. I took a step back, startled, waiting to see if he would knock it down or simply keep battering at it. After the sounds of breaking wood rattled across the room, I realized the something was the chair I had put under my son's door. After the chair shattered, he started battering the door with his fists, and I reached for the handgun on my nightstand, even as I reached for the phone on my charger. I dialed 911 and laid the phone against my ear, pointing the gun at the door steadily. I don't want to shoot my son, but if he came in meaning to harm me, I would do what I had to do. The operator picked up on the second ring. 911, what is your emergency? I told them that I needed some officers to come to my address. I told them that my son was acting violently, possibly under the influence, and I desperately needed help. The operator could hear the sounds of someone trying to batter my door in, and said that she would dispatch help right away. She told me to stay on the line, and I did just that. My aim shook a little as something put a fist-sized hole in my door. The frame shook and the surface bulged as whatever was trying to break in tore through the first layer of the door and into the interior. I haven't prayed since my wife died, but I prayed then that whatever God resided over all wouldn't make me shoot this child I had raised. I saw something crawl through the hole in the blackness of the dark room and reach for the doorknob. I leveled my gun and prepared to fire if the door opened. It slid around the knob, and I heard it twist just before the lock caught. Thankfully, I had remembered to lock the door. It had fumbled at the simple turn lock when the first blue and whites flashed through the windows. The black thing retreated then, and the silence that followed it was almost deafening. I snuck across the room to the door, gun leading as I peeked out into the hallway. The shadowy hall was empty, the door to the living room closed, and I shoved the door open noisily as it hung broken on the hinges. The police were banging on the door, calling to see if someone would let them in. I put the gun on the bookshelf by my door, not wanting to get shot myself, and I called to them to tell them that I was the caller and I was opening the door. The door came open, and they had their hands on their holsters, waiting to see who would open the door. They took in my boxer shorts and my scared face and asked me what had happened. I told them everything. I told them about the fight I'd had with my son. I told them about how he'd been in his room for days on end, only coming out at night to eat or cause trouble. I told them about the mess in the kitchen, even showing them some pictures I'd taken on my phone. I told them about the silent treatment we'd been engaged in for the last few days, and how tonight had simply been the icing on the cake. They agreed to come with me to talk to him. I knocked on the door, already knowing what I'd find. There was no response. The cops looked at me skeptically, but I told them this was just how he'd been lately. I opened the door to find him turned away from the door, blankets pulled up over himself, the same way he had been the last time I tried to talk to him. Marcus, you need to stop playing games and talk to these men. You went too far. My door is destroyed. You need to get up and tell them what you did. Marcus said nothing. That's when my temper flared again, and I strode forward to yank the blankets off the bed. Get the hell up. Stop being such a child. I know you can... When the blankets came off, I saw the dried blood soaked into the mattress. It had pooled on the floor beside the bed, and Marcus lay on his side as his eyes stared sightlessly at the wall. His body had begun to bloat, the skin blackening, and his wrists were jagged rips up his arm. The knife he had used was still clutched in his hand, and the blade was dark with dried blood. I spent several hours in the police station, shaking and trying to come to terms with what had happened. The cops hadn't put me in handcuffs. Professional courtesy, I guess. But they had implied that they suspected this wasn't as cut and dry as it looked. I suspected that they thought I had attempted to cover up a murder, but when the coroner's report came back, they determined that he'd been dead for a few days. The going consensus was he had killed himself after our last fight. They found a note on his desk, and if they hadn't already thought I was a shitty parent, that certainly sealed it. Not only had I essentially let my son kill himself and ignored him for the next 2 days, but I had driven him to it as well. The note he'd left said, "If you wish I had died in that crash so much, then let me just give you what you want. I'll be sure to tell Mom why I'm here so soon." They cut me loose an hour ago, but all I can do is sit in my car and shake. Part of it's grief. I can't believe I have to go back to that empty house by myself. I can't believe we'll never be able to put all this behind us and move on. Can't believe I'll never get to see him grow up, have kids of his own. I've lost everything now. My son, my wife, everything that made my house a home. But I'd be lying if I said that it wasn't fear as well. Because if my son was dead, what was the thing that destroyed my kitchen and came after me tonight? It passed within a few inches of me on that first night, and thinking back on that makes me shiver. The cops ignored me when I asked what I was supposed to do about whatever attacked me tonight. I know they think I'm making it up, trying to garner some kind of sympathy for my negligence, but I know what I saw. I saw that long, shadowy arm creep into the hole in my door. If it wasn't my son, then what the hell was that? As I sit in my car writing this, I don't know if I'll ever go home again. I don't even know if I have a home anymore. Oh yeah, this is coming along real great. I really think you guys are going to enjoy it when you finally hear it. If you finally hear it. I don't know. Some things I stash in the vault for later. A secret mousecatool for another time, if you will. But let's go on with another great story that may be semi-biographical. It didn't happen to me, but it's something that someone told me, so of course, take it with a grain of salt. Let's learn a little about the sewer. When I was in high school, I had a job at a local fast food chain. I worked there for 4 years, freshman year right up until I left for college, and I'd be lying if I said I didn't have some good times there. Holidays are spent together because we don't have much of a choice. Managers who were either good people or just entertaining to work with, coworkers who really became more like friends the longer you were there, and everything in between. I'm not going to say the whole 4 years was great, but it was an experience that I wouldn't trade for anything. Hell, I think everyone should have to work fast food for at least a few months. Gives you a little bit of perception on the guy behind the counter. The chain I worked for was unique in many ways. They were one of the few who let people host events in the lobby. We had a small concert there once for a local metal band, which made for some entertaining times. We had a policy to hire 14-year-olds under special circumstances, which got us into trouble more than once, due to 14-year-old girls flirting with much older guys. This led to allegations of underage hookups in the back room. They had a weird rehabilitated cons program that hired ex-cons fresh from prison, too. That one worked really well with the aforementioned hiring 14-year-olds policy, and also led to a couple of guys robbing the store after getting off shift. I don't even think they bothered to take their name tags off, so they were pretty easy to catch. One of my favorites, though, was our 24-hour program, which ran pretty much every summer that I worked there. You see, since I was under 18, I wasn't allowed to work past 10 on a school night. But during the summer, I could work as late or as early as I wanted, and I took full advantage of this to fill my pockets with cash. As you may have guessed, this program added a third shift to the usual 2-shift schedule. And it was a 12-hour shift to boot. You'd come in at 6 p.m., just as the dinner rush was ramping up, and work until 6 a.m., when the openers were coming in for their second cup of coffee. The hours were shit, and the pay still wasn't great. No pay differential for late shifts. But what made it worthwhile was the 4-hour lull in between 1 a.m. and 5 a.m. You might have to churn out some cheeseburgers or chicken nuggets for a bunch of drunk college kids, or a carload of stoners who might wander in wanting nuggets. But for the most part, you just kept the store clean and kind of hung out. It was usually a light crew, too, and on the night the story takes place, I had a good bunch of guys with me. I'd gotten my friend a job there that year. We'll call him Ryan, because he might read this. He and Trevor were on the grill that night. I was running the drive-thru window, and my favorite manager was watching the store, a guy named Joseph. Joseph was one of those rare managers that didn't have his head crammed up his ass, and gave just enough of a shit to fly under the radar. He was a cool guy. I sometimes wonder whatever happened to him. Anyway, it had been a long night, to say the least. The dinner rush was particularly bad, so as it starts to die down, we picked over the old food in the warming box and went to the break room to hang out. Some managers frowned on this, some would even write you up for it, but Joseph was cool and genuinely liked most of us. The lobby doors were locked at midnight to keep the weirdos out, and with the headset turned up so I could hear if a car rolled into the drive-thru, we started eating old cheeseburgers and swapping stories. The stories started pretty blandly. This thing that happened or that thing that someone had heard about. But finally, we fell into creepy stories about stuff we had experienced. I told them about the weirdo in our parking lot a few years ago who'd creeped a bunch of people out before the cops arrived. They found his wife's head in the passenger seat, along with a giant bloody machete. We thought he meant to rob or murder us, but it turns out he was just having a nervous breakdown in our parking lot after offing his old lady. Trevor tried to top it with a story about the time he'd been drinking with his cousin out in a cornfield, but none of us believed him. He said the old farmer had come out in the cornfield, slasher flick style, and screamed at them to get off his property while chasing them with a pitchfork. We piled in the truck and sped off, but something hit the back tailgate hard. Well, we didn't stop till we got to my cousin's house, and what we saw when we got out was the last thing we expected. He paused for dramatic effect. "What was it?" said Ryan, after Trevor had milked it for a little too long. "A pitchfork. The guy had thrown a pitchfork and stuck it right in the tailgate of the truck. If it had been a little higher, it would have come through the back rear glass and took all three of us right in the back of the head." He paused again like this should have been a dramatic revelation, but Ryan and I both shared a look like we doubted most of this had actually happened. When Joseph spoke up from the doorway, all three of us jumped. He'd been counting down the safe, so he hadn't been there for the start of the spooky stories. But it appeared he had come in just in time to catch the tail end of Trevor's story. Joseph was older than all three of us, a guy in his 30s with a wife and kids, and we often forgot that when we were hanging out because of how naturally he related to us. He was an avid gamer who did all the cool stuff we all hoped we'd be doing when we were adults. Right then, though, he had a decidedly dad look on his face as he addressed our little gathering of storytellers. "I've got a story for you guys," he said, spinning a chair around and sitting in it with his arms folded over the back. "And it's a true story, too. You want to hear it?" We did, and he began. I was working at the downtown store at the time, living in this dingy little apartment with my wife. We were broke, and she was pregnant and out on maternity leave. I was finishing up my bachelor's degree during the day, so nights were all I could count on to pay the bills. This was before the owner started up the third shift, or I'd have been all over that. So there I was, working the 3 to 11 shift, busting my hump, and we had a real hard-ass manager who kept us late almost every night, usually unpaid overtime, since we couldn't clean it right the first time, apparently. So most nights, I was lucky to get out of there about 12:30. The night in question had been especially bad, and I didn't get permission to leave until almost 1 in the morning. It was Friday night, though, so I knew I could sleep up until shift tomorrow if I needed to. Picking up my bag, I started trudging home through the chilly January air. Now, I know it rarely gets cold here, being Florida and all, but that winter had been particularly bad. They had all talked about snow more than once, and it had obliged us by dumping a semi-solid sheet of slush all over the place the night before. Most of it was off the road, but the wind was howling at me as I pulled my coat tight and walked up the deserted center of the road. Now, downtown is usually party central, unless you feel like driving to the beach, but tonight it was so cold that even the bars and coffee shops and all-night diners had shuttered their faces and gone to bed. The streetlights were on, and the sewer grates were belching steam up into the cold night. The whole scene looked pretty creepy to me. So, I'm walking up the center of the road, and there's a damn good reason I'm doing that, too, in case you were wondering. I was made aware of Stephen King's It from a very young age, and it had given me a real phobia about sewer drains. I didn't want to walk too close because, even with all that hard-won 23 years of wisdom I had, I just knew that on a cold, lonely night like tonight, I would get a taloned hand around my ankle and a quick trip into the sewer if I stepped too close to those smoking holes. So I walked right up the center of the street, as far from the grates as I could, and that particular night, it led me into trouble. So I'm walking up the center line, boots clomping on the asphalt, as I made my way through this way too quiet street. That's when I heard a noise. I thought at first it was the sound of steam escaping the grates. It was a hissing noise, after all, but when it came again, I heard it for what it was. You remember in grade school when some kid behind you wants to pass a note, so he makes that psst sound at you to get your attention? Well, that's what this sound was, a psst sound from the left side of the road. So I turn around, but I don't see anyone. I start walking again, and that same psst sound comes again from the left side of the road. I squinted at the dark alley between two buildings, getting ready to start flying if someone comes running out to mug me. But it's empty. That's when I heard it again. This time, somebody says something in a low voice, too. It sounds like, psst, hey buddy, followed by that sound again, psst, psst. Then I look down, and, I kid you not, there is a face in the drainage grate. As the steam comes curling up around it, I see a midnight black face looking out at me, and the only thing I can make out is its eyes, and they look fucking huge. I booked it. I start running, but as I run, I hear the voice behind me, shouting for me to come back. Then I realize the voice isn't behind me anymore. I glance to my left, and I see that it's following me from the openings of the sewer grates. Loud feet are slapping on the stone down there, and he's trying to get my attention. That's when I hear him yell real loud and fall with a watery splash. I didn't slow down in the least bit, but I saw the black ice a little too late when I turned back around. I hit it. My feet shot straight up and out from under me. I fell back hard against the pavement, and I was pretty sure I had broken my elbow when I came down hard on the concrete. At the time, I was trying to make my head stop spinning as the black spots danced around. I struggled up to my elbow, wincing as I got up on my hurt one, just as the spots started to go away. That's when I saw something that made my blood run cold. "What?" I asked, unable to help myself, wrapped up so deeply until at that moment I had barely realized I was breathing. The manhole cover, not 5 feet away, was coming up, and the face is looking out at me. I tried to get up, and I slipped again as this dripping, oozing thing climbed out of the opening. He towers over me from my prone position, and I start pushing with my legs as I slide away from him. He comes out oozing and quivering from the dark tunnel, and in my mind, he is the apotheosis of every shadowy creature from every horror movie I have ever seen. He is the creature from the Black Lagoon. He is it, the blob, and he's coming to drag me back down into the darkness so he can slowly devour me. His foot slaps down hard on the concrete as he menaces towards me. I'm still trying to slide away on my butt, my elbow starting to cry out now, and when my low back hits the curve, I just froze there as this creature from the midnight cinema towers over me, its oozing flesh dripping onto the concrete. It takes large, ponderous steps as it moves in on me, and at this point, I'm so gripped with fear I can't even move. Its flesh falls to the ground in gooey plops, and after 1,000,000 years crammed into 5 seconds, it's standing not 3 feet away from me. It bends its mountainous head down towards me, and in a gravelly voice, it says the last 3 words I figured I would ever hear, and they're the last 3 words I ever expected to hear from a creature like this. At this point, he looks at us, his mask of pent-up terror melting into a creepy smile, the creepiest smile I've ever seen, as he gravels out, "Got a light?" We sat, dumbfounded, for nearly 15 seconds before Trevor sputters, "What?" Joseph laughs. He asked if I had a light. It turns out he was a homeless guy who'd been living in the sewers to stay warm. He had gotten himself a pry bar so he could hook it under the lid, and he'd been staying in the sewers at night where it was warm. He had no clue why it was so steamy down there, but it was a great place to sleep, when the alternative was freezing your ass off in the park, or down by the pier with the other vags. When I asked him why he was covered in what I hoped was mud, he said that he'd been chasing after me, trying to get a lighter to spark a cigarette. Then he'd fallen in a muddy slush puddle and gotten covered in the stuff. I laughed and handed him the lighter out of my bag, an old Zippo my old man had given me, and considered it a fair trade for a great story. I've told that story so many times over the years, and it never gets old. We laughed about that story and Joseph's deadpan way of building it up right until the very end, for years to come. I've begged him to retell it 150 times, and it never gets old. So if you're ever downtown on a cold night and someone tries to get your attention from the closest sewer grate, just remember that it's probably some vagrant trying to stay warm and have a smoke. And if they drag you down into the sewer for a slow process of digestion, then I guess I was wrong, wasn't I? One more story for you. Then I think it might be time to compile this puppy and maybe go do a little reading or, I don't know, maybe hit the treadmill. I am looking a little doughy these days. This next story is one of my favorites. I don't want to say it was an April Fool's story, but it was, and it definitely shows. So, if you think it might be time for some revenge, please don't play around with the party pooper. I heard Susan was having a party this weekend while her parents were out of town. Oh yeah? Any of us invited? Nope, just the popular kids, the jocks, few of the popular academics, no one from our bunch. Sounds like a special guest might be needed then. We were all sitting in the back of Mrs. Smith's history class, so the nod was almost uniform. Around us, people were talking about Susan's party. Why shouldn't they be? Susan Masterson was one of the most popular girls in school, after all. But they were all talking about the mysterious events that had surrounded the last 4 parties hosted by popular kids. The figure that kept infiltrating these parties was part of that mystery. Nobody knew who they were. Nobody saw them commit their heinous deeds, but the results were always the same. Sometimes it was on the living room floor. Sometimes it was in the kitchen on the snack table. Sometimes it was in the top of the toilet in her parents' bathroom, a place that no one was supposed to have been. No matter where it was, someone always found poop at the party. Do you still have any of those candles left? I asked Tina, running a hand over my gelled-up hair to make sure the spikes hadn't drooped. Yeah, found a place in the barrio that sells them, but they're becoming hard to track down. I could only get about a dozen of them. A dozen is more than enough, Cooper said. With a dozen, we can hit 6 more parties at least. Pretty soon, Mark said, they'll learn not to snub us. Pretty soon, they'll learn that we hold the fate of their precious parties. The bell rang then, and we rose like a flock of ravens and made our way out of class. The beautiful people scoffed at us as we walked up the hall, saying things like, "There goes the coven," and "Hot Topic must be having a going-out-of-business sale." But they would learn better soon. Before long, they would learn that we were the lords of this school, 'cause we controlled that which made them shiver. I've never been what you'd call popular. I've probably been more of what you'd call a nerd since about the 2nd grade. Don't get me wrong, I was a nerd before that, but that was about the time that my peers started to notice. They commented on my thick glasses, my love of comic books, and the fact that I got our class a pizza party every year off just the books that I read. Suddenly, it wasn't so cool to be seen with the nerd. I found my circle of friends shrinking from grade to grade, and it wasn't until I got to high school that I found a regular group of people to hang out with. Incidentally, that was the year I discovered that I liked dressing goth. My colorful wardrobe became a lot darker, and I started 9th grade with a new outlook on life. My black boots, band t-shirts, and ripped black jeans had made me stand out, but not in the way I had hoped. I went from being a nerd to a freak, but I discovered that the transformation wasn't all bad. Suddenly, I had people interested in getting to know me, and that was how I met Mark, Tina, and Cooper. I was a sophomore now, and despite some things having changed, some things had stayed the same. We all acted like we didn't care that the popular kids snubbed us and didn't invite the nerds or the freaks to their parties, but it still didn't feel very good to be ostracized. We were never invited to sit with them at lunch, never asked to go to football games or events, never invited to Spirit Week or homecoming. And the more we thought about it, the more that felt wrong. That was when Tina had come up with something special. Tina was a witch, not the fake wands and butterbeer kind of witch, but the kind with real magic. She had inherited her aunt's grimoire, a real book of shadows that she'd used when she was younger, and Tina had been doing some hexes and curses on people that she didn't like. She'd given Marcy Graves that really bad rash before homecoming, no matter how much she wanted to say it was because she was allergic to the carnation that Gavin had got her. She had caused Travis Brown to trip in that hole and lose the big game that would have taken us to state, too. People would claim that it was just a coincidence, but we all knew better. So, when she came to us and told us she had found something that would really put a damper on their parties, we had been stoked. "Susan's party is tomorrow," Tina said, checking her grimoire as we walked to art class. "So, if we do the ritual tomorrow night, we can totally ruin her party." Some of the popular girls, Susan among them, looked up as we passed, but we were talking too low for them to hear us. She mouthed the words freaks, but I ignored her. She'd see freaks tomorrow night when her little party got pooped on. We spent art class discussing our own gathering for tomorrow. After we discovered the being in Tina's book, we never called what we did parties anymore. They were gatherings now. It sounded more occult. We weren't some dumb airheads getting together for beer and hookups. We were a coven, coming together to make some magic. This was bigger than anything these guys could think of. "Cooper, you bring the offering and the snacks," Tina said. Cooper made a face. "Can I bring the drinks instead? Bringing food along with the offering just seems kind of gross." Tina thought about it before nodding. "Yeah, good idea. And be sure to wash your hands after you get the offering." Cooper nodded. "Good, because I still have Bacardi from last time." "Mark, you bring the snacks then," Tina said. "And don't forget to bring the fennel weed. We need it for the ritual." Mark nodded. "Mr. Dakar said that I could bring the leftover chicken at the end of my shift, so I hope that's okay." That was fine with us. The chicken Mark brought was always a great end to the ritual. "Cool, that leaves the ipecac syrup and the X-Lax from you, my dear," she said, smiling at me as my face turned a little red under my light foundation. Tina and I had been an item for a couple of weeks, and I still wasn't quite used to it. I'd never had a girlfriend before then, and the giddy feeling inside me was at odds with my goth exterior. Tina was cute, and she was the de facto leader of our little coven. It was kind of cool to be dating a real witch. "So, we all meet at my house tomorrow before 10. Agreed?" We all agreed, and the pact was sealed. The next night, Friday, I arrived at 6, so Tina and I could hang out before the others got there. Her parents were out of town again, which was cool because she never had to make excuses for where she was going. My parents thought I was spending the night at Mark's. Cooper's parents thought he was spending the night at Mark's, and Mark's mom was working a third shift, so she wasn't going to be home to answer any questions if they called to check in. It was a perfect storm, and we were prepared to be at the center of it. Tina was already setting up the circle and making preparations, but she broke off when I came in with my part of the ritual. We were both a little out of breath when Cooper arrived an hour later, and after hurriedly getting ourselves back in order, he came in with 2 12-packs. "Swipe these from my uncle. He's already drunk, so he'll never miss them. I think he just buys them for the 20-year-olds he's trying to bang anyway." "As long as you brought the other thing, too," Tina said, "unless you mean to make it here." Cooper rolled his eyes and handed over a grungy Tupperware with a severe-looking lid on it. "I got it right here, don't worry." He helped us with the final prep work, and we were all on our 1000th game of Mario Kart by the time Mark got there at 9. He smelled like grease and chicken and immediately went to change out of his work clothes. I didn't know about everyone else, but I secretly loved that smell. Mark was self-conscious about smelling like fried chicken, but I liked it. If I thought it was a smell I wouldn't become blind to after a few weeks, I'd probably ask him to get me a job at Colonel Register's Chicken Chateau, too. Cooper tried to reach in for some of the chicken, but Tina smacked his hand. "Ritual first, then food." Cooper gave her a dark look, but nodded as we headed upstairs. It was time to ruin another Amber Zombie and Fitch party. When Tina had showed us the summons for something called the Party Pooper, we had all been a little confused. "The Party Pooper?" Cooper had asked, pointing to the picture of the little man with the long beard and the evil glint in his eyes. "The Party Pooper," Tina confirmed. "He's a spirit of revenge for the downtrodden. He comes to those who have been overlooked or mistreated and brings revenge in their name by," she looked at what was written there, "leaving signs of the summoner's displeasure where it can be found." "Neat," said Cooper. "So how do we summon him?" Turns out the spell was pretty easy. We would need a clay vessel, potions or tinctures to bring about illness from the well, herbs to cover the smell of waste, and the medium by which revenge could be achieved. Once the ingredients were assembled, we would light the candles and perform the chant to summon the Party Pooper to do our bidding. That first time, it had been a kegger at David Frick's house, and we had been particularly salty about it. David had invited Mark, the two of them having science together, and when Mark had seemed thrilled to be invited, David had laughed. "Yeah, right, chicken fry, like I need you smelling up my party." Everyone had laughed, and it had been decided that David would be our first victim. As we stood around the earthen bowl, Tina wrinkled her nose as she bent down to light the candles. "God, Cooper, do you eat anything besides Taco Bell?" Cooper shrugged, grinning from ear to ear. "What can I say? It was some of my best work." The candles came lit with a dark, greasy light. The ingredients were mixed in the bowl, and then the offering was laid atop it. The spell hadn't been specific in the kind of filth it required, but given the name of the entity, Tina thought it best to make sure it was fresh and ripe. That didn't exactly mean she wanted to smell Cooper's poop, but it seemed worth the discomfort. "Link hands," she said, "and begin the chant." We linked hands, Mark's as clammy as Tina's were sweaty, and we began to chant. "Every party needs a pooper. That's why we have summoned you. Party pooper. Party pooper." The circle puffed suddenly, the smell like something from an outhouse. The greasy light of the candles showed us the now familiar little man, his beard long and his body short. He was bald, with a head covered in liver spots, and his mean little eyes were the color of old dog turds. His bare feet were black, like a corpse's, and his toes looked rotted and disgusting. He wore no shirt, only long brown trousers that left his ankles bare, and he took us in with weary good cheer. "Ah, if it isn't my favorite little witches! Who has wronged you tonight, children?" We were all quiet, knowing it had been Tina to whom he spoke. The spell had been pretty clear that a crime had to be stated for this to work. The person being harassed by the Party Pooper had to have wronged one of the summoners in some way for the revenge to be extracted, so we had to find a reason for the summoning. The reason for David had come from Mark, and it had been humiliation. After David had come Frank Gold, and that one had been from Cooper. Frank had cheated him, refusing to pay for an essay he had written, and then having him beaten up when he told him that he would tell Mrs. Bess about it. Cooper had cited damages to his person and debt. The third time had been mine, and it was Margaret Wheeler. Margaret and I had known each other since elementary school, and she was not very popular. She and I had been friends, but when I'd asked her to the Sadie Hawkins dance in 8th grade, she had laughed at me and told me that there was no way she'd be seen with a dork like me. That had helped her get in with the other girls in our grade, and it only served to alienate me further. I had told the Party Pooper that her crime was disloyalty, and he had accepted that. Now, it was Susan's turn, and we all knew that Tina had the biggest grudge against her for something that had happened in elementary school. "Susan Masterson," Tina intoned. "And how has this Susan Masterson wronged thee?" "She was a false friend who invited me to her house so she could humiliate me." The Party Pooper thought about this, but didn't seem to like the taste. I think not, he finally said. There was a palpable silence in the room. No, has it ever occurred to you that this Susan Masterson may have done you a favor? Were it not for her, you may very well be somewhere else tonight, instead of surrounded by loyal friends. Tina was silent for a moment. This was clearly not going as planned. No, I think it is jealousy that drives your summons tonight. You are jealous of this girl, and you wish to ruin her party because of it. He floated a little higher over the circle, and I didn't like the way he glowered down at us. What's more, you have ceased to be downtrodden and mistreated, and I am to blame for this. I have empowered you, made you dependent, and I am sorry for this. Do not summon me again, children, not until you have a true reason for doing such. With that, he disappeared in a puff of foul wind, and we were left standing in stunned silence. It hadn't worked. The party pooper had refused to help us. Oh well, Cooper said, sounding a little downtrodden. I guess we didn't have as good a claim as we thought. Well, let's go eat that chicken, he said, turning to go. That sucks, Mark said. Next time we'll need something a little fresher, I guess. They were walking out the room, but as I made to follow them, I noticed that Tina hadn't moved. She was staring at the spot where the party pooper had been, tears welling in her eyes, and as I put a hand on her shoulder, she exhaled a loud, agitated breath. I tried to lead her out of the room, but she wouldn't budge, and I started to get worried. T, it's okay. We'll try again some other time. Those assholes are bound to mess up eventually, and then we can get them. It's just a matter of time. Tina was crying for real now, her mascara running as the tears fell in heavy black drops. It's not fair. It's not fair. She let me fall asleep and put my hand in water. She took it away after I wet myself, and I saw the water ring, though. I felt how wet my fingers were, and when she laughed and told the other girls I wet myself, I knew she had done it on purpose. She ruined it. She ruined my chance of being popular. It's not fair. How is my grievance any less viable than you guys? Come on, hun, I said. Let's go get drunk and eat some chicken. You'll feel a lot better. I tried to lead her towards the door, but as we came even, she shoved me into the hall and slammed it in my face. Mark and Cooper turned as they heard the door slam, and we all came back and banged on it as we tried to get an answer. Tina, what are you doing? Don't do anything stupid. From under the door, I could see the light of candles being lit, and just under the sound of Mark and Cooper banging, I heard a very familiar chant. Every party needs a pooper. That's why I have summoned you, party pooper, party pooper. Then the candle lights were eclipsed as a brighter light lit the room. We all stepped away from the door as an otherworldly voice thundered through the house. The party pooper had always been a jovial little creature when we had summoned him, but this time he sounded anything but friendly. The party pooper sounded pissed. You dare to summon me, mortal? You believe you are owed my power? You believe you are entitled to my aid? See now why they call me the party pooper. There was a sound somewhere between a jello mold hitting the ground and a truckload of dirt being unloaded, and something began to ooze beneath the door. When it popped open, creaking wide with a horror movie slowness, I saw that every surface in Tina's room had been covered in a brown sludge. It covered the ceiling, the walls, the bed, and everything in between. Tina lay in the middle of the room, her body covered in the stuff, and as I approached her, the smell hit me all at once. It was like an open sewer drain, the scent of raw sewage like a palpable blow, and I barely managed to power through it to get to Tina's side. Tina, are you okay? She said nothing, but when she opened her mouth, a bucket of that foul-smelling sewage came pouring out. She coughed, and more came up. She spent nearly 10 minutes vomiting up the stuff, and when she finally stopped, I got her to her feet and helped her out of the room. Start the shower. We need to get the stuff off of her. I scrubbed her, taking her sodden clothes off and cleaning the worst of it off her. She was covered in it. It was caked in her ears and her nose, in other places, and it seemed the party pooper had wasted nothing in the pursuit of justice. She still wouldn't speak after that, and I wanted to call an ambulance. She could be really sick, I told them, when Cooper said we shouldn't. That stuff was inside her. If we call the hospital, our parents are going to know we lied. In the end, it was a chance I was willing to take. I stayed, Mark and Cooper leaving so they didn't get in trouble. I told the paramedics that she had called me, saying she felt like she was dying, and I came to check on her. They loaded her up and called her parents, but I was told it would be better if I went back home and waited for updates. Tina was never the same after that. Her mother thanked me for helping her when I came to see her, but told me Tina wouldn't even know I was there. She's catatonic. They don't know why, but she's completely lost control of her bowels. She vomits for no reason. She has, I don't know what, in her stomach, but they say it's like she fell into a septic tank. She's breathed it into her lungs. It's behind her eyelids. She has infections in her ears and nose because of it, and we don't know what's wrong with her. That was 6 months ago. They put Tina into an institution for someone to take care of her 24/7, but she still hasn't said a word. She's getting better physically, but something is broken inside her. I still visit, hoping to see some change, but it's like talking to a corpse. I still hang out with Mark and Cooper, but I know they feel guilty for not going to see her. In the end, Tina tried to force a revenge with a creature that she didn't understand, and paid the price. So if you think you might have a grievance worthy of the party pooper, do yourself a favor and just let it go. Nothing is worth incurring the wrath of that thing, and you might find yourself in deep shit for your trouble. Every party needs a pooper, that's why they invited you, party pooper. Oh, shoot, story's over. Well, just like that, that'll end our stories for the day. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you'll be back another time for more cozy horror with me, Dr. Plague. Till then, I hope you have a wonderful day and a spooky evening.